Greetings, wanderers, and welcome back to my lair. It is I, Remortis, Necromancer extraordinaire. Today's chapter of the Necronomicon will be about darkness and shadow, and as predicted, this category of magic won't be able to be achieved until you are quite seasoned in Sanctuary, mostly due to the fact that there are some unique items that you need to truly bring out the power of these builds. Primarily, Howl from Below and Black River, which can make some fun interactions and options for your abilities to deliver darkness damage. Greaves of the Empty Tomb could be useful in combination with Sever, and Bloodless Scream could be used with an interesting control and chill build. But with that aside, let us go over the primary methods of playing Darkness and Shadow. Beginning with the first and probably most popular variant of the Shadow builds, known as Shadowmist, coined by the great Necromancer Naecabon, who was the first Necromancer to clear a level 100 Nightmare Sigil. This build is all about speed, defense, and melting your enemies with Blighted Corpse Explosion. With the skill and spell combinations utilized here, you can consistently be in the safety of your Blood Mist, consequently becoming perhaps the tankiest build of all the classes, since you'll be constantly immune to damage, while melting your enemies with your Shadow Farts. We'll begin with the Book of the Dead, as this is a solo build. We'll be sacrificing our Reapers for increased shadow damage, our Cold Mages for increased vulnerability damage, and our Iron Golem for increased critical damage. For your spells, you'll be using Reap simply for damage reduction. This build doesn't really care about having Essence, except to cast Decrepify, but it's so cheap you won't ever be Essence starved. We'll be casting Decrepify as mentioned, which will slow and weaken your enemies and have a chance to lower your cooldowns. Blood Mist, which is the cornerstone of the build for the reasons mentioned before. Corpse Tendrils to round up your foes, stunning them and making them vulnerable. And lastly, Bone Storm as your ultimate to provide survivability as well as increasing your critical damage and applying darkness damage, thanks to your aspects. But of course, you can't forget to include Corpse Explosion itself if you have tons of corpses laying around that you may have missed with your mist. No pun intended. The key talents to grab here are Huge Flesh, which has a chance to make more corpses, the Macabre passive Fueled by Death to increase damage when we do utilize those corpses that we make, the Darkness passes with Gloom and Terror to increase our damage, and Reaper's Pursuit to increase our movement speed and momentum. And with Shadow Blight as our key passive, which is what makes our damage so high when combined with the proper aspects. Speaking of aspects, let's get into those. The primary offensive aspects which cannot be changed under any circumstances are Blight, Decay, Grasping Veins, and Ultimate Shadow. With Shadow Soak being a very good option here, though you can swap it in and out depending on the uniques that you're running. The Howl from Below makes it easier to land your Corpse Explosion since it will hump them down most of the time, but isn't 100% necessary. You can play around with that fact by just controlling the enemies to make sure they're on top of your corpses. This just makes it easier and you don't have to worry about that aspect of combat. The Black River, on the other hand, is a very powerful option should you find it, as it will consume up to 5 corpses at the same time, which can be quite useful and can do incredible amounts of damage and may just make it easier for you to dish out damage quicker. The only downside of that is sometimes you might end up consuming all the corpses before you have a chance to use your Corpse Tendrils, so just be careful with that. Other than that though, it's a really fun unique. For utility aspects, you must run Explosive Mist to trigger Corpse Explosions when you're in your misty form, but it'll also lower your cooldown when you do so. If you use this while enemies are cursed with Decrepify, you could possibly cast Blood Mist back to back. Ghostwalker is another good option to run, to increase your movement speed while you're unstoppable, such as when you're inside your mist. For defensive aspects, you could run Disobedience, which simply at the moment is one of the best ways to increase your survivability by multiplying your armor values. For our Paragon board, we'll be using Wither, Flesh Eater, Scent of Death, and Bloodbath. In Wither, we'll be sure to grab Lingering Shadows, Malediction, Gnawing Darkness, Dragging Shadows, and the Wither nodes. For Flesh Eater, we'll grab Stifle, Targeted, Erudite, and Flesh Eater. Scent of Death's board will grab Ruin, Deathmark, Preservation, and Scent of Death. And as mentioned, Bloodbath will just be grabbing the Glyph socket there. The Glyphs will be using our Darkness, Exploit, Scourge, Territorial, and Control. You level up your Glyphs in that order, though you can place them wherever you prefer, but you can also look inside the guide linked below to see where I place mine. For stats on gear, we want to look for cooldown reduction, anything that gives plus ranks to Decrepify, Tendrils, and Corpse Explosion. Plus Corpse Skills and Fueled by Death are also great pickups as well. For offensive stats, we want to look for Lucky Hit Chance, Critical Chance, and Damage. Shadow damage with Dot, as well as attack speed and vulnerable damage. For defenses, we want damage reduction affected by Shadow Dots, maximum life, armor, and movement speed and intelligence / all stats are also great choices. Next, we'll move into the Sever build, which also dips into Blight as well, depending if you're running that aspect or not. Or you can just straight up use Blight instead. This build is pretty interchangeable, though keep in mind if you are using minions, we'll need different aspects and gear. The spells that we use here are the same as Shadowmist, except we are using Sever instead of Reap. Key aspects here are similar to the Shadowmist as well, except that you don't need the uniques that build requires. In lieu of those uniques, you can run the aspect of Empowering Reaper, which will provide a chance to cast Empowered Blights for free, which is why you dip to Blight. And if you are running minions, you can spec into Blight to increase your and your minions' damage as well. And speaking of running minions, you could also run the Coldbringer aspect for your cold mages. As for uniques for this specific build, we can run Blood of Scream, which will make this Darkness build become a high CC and Frozen build. And of course, if you run with minions, no minion build is complete without the Ring of Mendel, which just does incredible damage. I hope you enjoyed this chapter of the Necronomicon. Shadow and Darkness is a very fun playstyle, and quite iconic, especially if you're running with minions. As for this video and the other Necronomicon videos, the ultimate purpose of these videos is to kind of theorycraft so we can kind of understand how they work, so that when Blizzard ends up tuning all these spells, whether it's nerfing another build or buffing this one, we'll at least know the mechanics and basics of how these abilities work together, as we explore other avenues and capabilities of the Necromancer and see what other builds are possible. And I hope to see you in the next one. Farewell for now, Necromancer.